So I want to go through this statement that Trump released Monday. I don't know if you've seen this or not. But Monday, Trump released the statement response to the January 6th committee, these hearings, what's going on in the country. And I know a lot of people think that Trump is a retrobate. We know he likes to brag about himself. But if you actually listen to what Trump has been saying about the 2020 election, he's been fairly consistent. And I'm just throwing this out there. If he's beating the same drum, then maybe, perhaps, we should have a second look at what happened in the 2020 election. Even if Trump lost by a landslide, what could it hurt to have a second look? Because he goes through the numbers here. And when you're a high-profile candidate, you're seeing things from a different angle than the public. Just like if I'm working on a YouTube video. The old saying, how the sausage is made. You know, be really surprised at what it takes to run a hotel. That's my day job. I work at a hotel. So I do this on the side, write music in my spare time. So there are things that Trump was seeing that night that we didn't. So I'm pretty sure he was keeping a very sharp eye on all these polls, what was going on in Detroit at this TCF Center, what was happening in Atlanta, in Madison, Wisconsin, Chicago, you name it. So let's get to the statement that Trump put out Monday. And for the sake of time, I'm just going to read some excerpts. Kind of skip around here. So he starts out by saying, our nation is suffering. And the word suffering is in all caps. Our economy is in the gutter. Inflation is rampant. Gas prices have reached an all-time high. Ships are unable to unload cargo. Families cannot get needed baby formula. This is all true. You know, my boss was in the store the other day. She told us this. We had a staff meeting. She went to go get some lunch meat for the maintenance crew. They wanted to make sandwiches. I guess we had run out of lunch meat. $10 for turkey. And you can just imagine what it cost for the gas to get there. And we're talking a short distance. We're an embarrassment around the world. Our withdrawal from Afghanistan was a disaster. Remember Afghanistan, that blunder? It cost us precious American blood and gave $85 billion worth of the best military equipment on earth to our enemy. $85 billion. Millions and millions of illegals are marching to the border and invading our country. We have a White House in shambles with Democrats just this week declaring that Biden is unfit to run for re-election. So the Democrats are throwing Biden under the bus because A, the guy's too old, he needs to retire, and B, nobody's buying what he's selling. Get back on the boat, Biden. Vote you, Biden. And what is the Democrat Congress focused on? A kangaroo court hoping to distract the American people from the great pain they are experiencing. That's exactly what this is. These hearings are nothing more than a distraction from what's really going on in the country, because if things were going really well in the country right now with these Democrats, we wouldn't be having these hearings. Trump has been out of office for what, a year and a half, almost 2 years now? "17 months after the events of January 6th, Democrats are unable to offer solutions. They are desperate to change the narrative of a failing nation, without even making mention of the havoc and death caused by the radical left just months earlier." Of course, he's talking about these riots in 2020. 100,000 pages, by the way. 100,000 pages for the quote-unquote insurrection, this investigation into January 6th. But mum's a word on what happened with these riots in Portland, Seattle, Chicago, Atlanta. Where did all this funding come from? Why are they buying up all these mansions, BLM? Make no mistake, they control the government. They own this disaster. They're hoping that these hearings will somehow alter their failing prospects. A certain Democrat once said, "It's the economy, stupid," Bill Clinton. Well, Democrats now seem to think that Americans are stupid. They are not. America is crumbling. Democrats have no solutions. Our nation has no hope of change for the better under Democrat leadership. People are desperate. Rather than solving problems, Democrats are rehashing history in hopes of changing the narrative. During my time in office, our nation was thriving, our economy was strong, and the price of gas was very low. That's true. We had low gas prices. You could afford to buy food. If I get the words out, I'll be all right. You could find baby formula. Above all else, we were respected, perhaps like never before. America prospered under the Trump administration. Okay, so he's gloating it. But hey, you could afford gas. You could find a job. Talks about the quote-unquote sham investigation. Our Constitution protects the right to confront accusers, honors the right to fair trials, and holds the right to legal representation as paramount in our justice system. Equal representation and the opportunity to offer rebuttal evidence is fundamental in our legal process. The committee has obliterated those rights and is making a mockery of justice. They have refused to allow their political opponents to participate in this process. It's all been one-sided. Calling their own witnesses, by the way. And have excluded all exculpatory witnesses in anyone who so easily points out the flaws in the story. And there are many, beginning with security on January 6th. We had this insurrection happening in D.C. Where was security? And you have reports coming out that they knew they were going to have really large crowds. They weren't prepared for this. But you've seen the footage where if they did have security, they were standing around like dopes while these people broke into the Capitol building. Come on, folks, you can't tell me this was not a setup. Of course it was. But blame Trump. And Trump never once, go back and check the tape, correct me if I'm wrong on the comment section below, but Trump never once told his supporters to go charge the Capitol building, to engage in insurrection. He told them we are now going to peacefully and patriotically march to the Capitol building to make our voices heard. And you have every constitutional right to do so. A president has every constitutional right to protest the results of an election. There's nothing illegal about that. And it is legal for them to pressure the vice president, who at the time is president of the Senate. Mike Pence was the president of the Senate. It is legal for them to pressure the vice president, president of the Senate, to find some way to maneuver the process, or through the process, if illegal votes are found. And there was a question of ballot harvesting in these different counties, in these swing states. And the Constitution grants the power to the President of the Senate, the Vice President, to toss those votes out. The MAGA witnesses were interrogated behind closed doors, ordered not to record their own testimony. Why? FBI. Why? DOJ. Members of my staff, my friends, supporters, volunteers, donors were subjected to hours upon hours of inquisition, oftentimes having nothing to do with January 6th. Their very lives were turned upside down for obvious reasons. They were told it was an ongoing investigation and that any reproduction of the interrogation would be viewed as an attempt to interfere in the investigation. So if you asked about what was going on with the investigation, if you wanted to get a copy of your interrogation, you were interfering with the investigation. They were gagged, threatened, and in some cases, ruined. Yet the unselected pseudo-committee has coordinated with their media puppets to broadcast their witnesses on national television without any opposition, cross-examination, or rebuttal evidence. Unconstitutional. The American public has a right to know the truth and see every witness, but these corrupt officials try to read this cold. These corrupt officials are trying to force feed the public with their politically opportune sideshow. So he talks about stop the count. It says here, on election night, America watched as my lead grew and grew over Joe Biden. I was set to claim another victory. By the morning of November 4th, the day after the election, I led by 700,000 votes. That was in Pennsylvania, 300,000 in Michigan, and hundreds of thousands in Georgia, Arizona, and Wisconsin. Then the same little dictators, he mentions earlier, that these state legislators were going against their own state constitution. These little dictators who destroyed the separation of powers made the treasonous decision to stop counting. These same states who had counted millions of ballots in a single day had to stop counting in order to count a few 100,000 ballots over the next 4 days to call the race on November 7th. Now, if I were just a casual observer, had no dog in this fight, I would be asking this question that I'm going to share with you here. Why would it take 4 more days to count a few 100,000 votes when they had counted millions in one day? Very good question. You could count millions of votes in one day, but it took you 4 more days to count a few 100,000 votes. Why was that? They needed time to traffic the ballots and manipulate the outcome of the election. The swamp was so determined to keep their stranglehold on power, they delayed the results of the election so they could find, manufacture, or produce more ballots after they knew how many they needed to beat me. They cheated. Talks about ballot trafficking, True the Vote, how Engelbert and Phillips used geofencing data that they purchased to isolate and identify potential mules. So mules are people who are paid to illegally traffic ballots from nonprofit organizations, drop them into these ballot boxes. Talks about how at least one whistleblower at one of the nonprofits in Yuma, Arizona, came forward and confirmed that these organizations act as trafficking hubs for the mules to pick up the ballots to drop off at the drop boxes. One woman in Arizona had already pled guilty to a Class 6 felony for participating in this ballot trafficking scheme. Democrats are getting tax write-offs for this behavior. Now get this, folks. True the Vote and local law enforcement have the video surveillance showing the mules dropping many ballots into the drop box, which confirms the geofencing data that Engelbert and Phillips had gathered. Now, there's been a lot of talk about this geofencing data, how accurate it is. But this is key here, this is the same surveillance evidence that the FBI had used to identify January 6 protesters. In fact, the FBI used this same type of evidence in 45 of the criminal cases against January 6 protesters. So it's the exact same evidence the FBI used against January 6 protesters. How can this evidence be indispensable, as he says here, an indispensable tool to identify January 6 protesters, but when applied to ballot traffickers, the science is unreliable and not precise? So he talks about what happened in Georgia, in Michigan, Arizona, Pennsylvania. So based on the data, Georgia had 250 mules averaging 24 drop boxes with 5 ballots each, totaling 30,000 illegal ballots. The margin of victory in Georgia was only 11,779. Similar story occurred in Arizona. 200 identified mules averaged 20 drop boxes and 5 ballots each. That's a minimum of 20,000 illegal ballots. The margin of victory in Arizona was 10,457. Arizona's 11 electoral votes should have not gone to Biden. Then 1,100 mules were identified by True the Vote in Philadelphia, averaging 50 drop boxes and 5 ballots per box, averages out to 275,000 illegal ballots. Margin of victory would have been 80,555. He talks about what happened at the TCF Center in Detroit. It was 29,000 votes. But get this, folks. Biden outdid Obama in Atlanta and in Detroit. Let me find that here. Baseman Biden earned more votes than Obama in Fulton County, Georgia, Atlanta, by 131,733, 53%. And Wayne County, Michigan, Detroit, by 1,917, that's 0.3%. These are the two largest black populations in the United States. Biden also earned more votes than Obama's 2012 campaign in Cobb County, Georgia, by 89,321, that's 52%. He says either there's a lot of black voters in America who identify more with Joe Biden than Barack Obama, or Democrats are stealing black votes, and we all know the answer to that. So I wanted to share this with you. This was Trump's response to this January 6th hearing, the Biden administration, all these allegations. And what they're doing to Trump is unconstitutional. They have no constitutional authority to go after Trump like this. He is no longer in office. He has no obligation to the U.S. government. None. Except maybe pay his taxes. Well, that's for another time. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, you know what to do. You can also follow me at Instagram, hashtag Jason Composes, or find me on Twitter, Cultural Confederacy at Twitter. This is the Cultural Confederacy saying peace out, stay safe, everybody. God bless this great country, and I'll catch you next time.